Hey, welcome to the Allplane Podcast, where we continue to explore different aspects of the aviation industry, as well as different sorts of interesting and eye-catching projects that involve airplanes. But first of all, a quick reminder that you can find all episodes of this podcast, as well as many other aviation stories, on our website. That's allplane.tv. Allplane.tv. Today's guest is a Siberian mathematician. She is engaged in a truly amazing project. Maria Karmanova has spent over a decade restoring a former Aeroflot Tu-104 aircraft at an airfield near Novosibirsk in Siberia, Russia. Back in 2009, Maria found the Soviet-era aircraft in a derelict state at a local airfield, and since then she has made it her mission to bring it back to its original state. Although it might be little known in the West, the Tupolev 104, which entered service in the 1950s, has a place of honor in the history of aviation, since it was only the second jet airliner in the world to enter regular service. Some might even say it was the first successful jet airliner in the world, since the very first one, the British Comet, had to be retired from service quite early due to technical issues. The Tupolev 104 was actually a truly advanced aircraft for its time and served with distinction for several decades all over the former Soviet bloc. Today, we are going to hear from Maria how she and a team of volunteers have invested countless hours and efforts in the restoration of this aircraft, thoroughly researching every aspect of it and combing the internet in the search of original parts that they later put back in place. This is a huge undertaking that requires methodical work. It is currently advancing at good pace though, but I think it would be best if we hear this amazing story directly from her. Hello, Maria. How are you?
Hello, Mikhail. I'm fine, thanks.
So you're in Novosibirsk or in Bertsk, which is near Novosibirsk?
Now I'm in Novosibirsk. I live in Novosibirsk, but I come to Bersk each weekend, or almost
Uh-huh.
each weekend, to
Okay.
work on the Tupolev 104.
Yes, we're going to talk about this plane now because it's a very, very interesting story. First of all, I think best is we start with an introduction about who you are. You are a mathematician uh, by
Yes,
by education and by profession. I mean, you work as a mathematician right now in
yes.
academia. You have even written quite a few scientific papers on
Yes,
very
many scientific papers. It's
on
my work.
very on very elevated mathematical topics that I'm completely beyond my understanding. But yeah, so that's, let's say, your main job. But besides that, you have another interest or passion. I don't know if you can call it a work as well, because you spend quite a lot of time with and it's aviation, and in particular, it's a restoration of an old Soviet airliner, a Tupolev 104. You're going to tell us more about this plane now. Novosibirsk, just for the audience, it's main city in Siberia, in Russia. And it's how many miles from Moscow? It's quite far away.
Novosibirsk is about 2,800 kilometers from Moscow, and
So
Bersk is relatively near Novosibirsk. It's only about 40 kilometers from Novosibirsk.
you are, just to give an idea of the distances in Russia, you are 4 time zones away from Moscow, and you are just in the middle of Siberia. So,
And in the
so
middle of Russia. In the middle
yes,
of
in the middle
Russia.
of Russia, true. So yeah, Novosibirsk is big city. It used to be, well, it is a big scientific city, right? So you have lots of universities. It's as well an aviation hub. There's like S7 Airlines have a hub there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm, yes.
And then there
One
is,
of hubs, I think.
so basically you have been in aviation already for quite some time. You're a pilot as well, or you've been.
No, but I like to fly on big simulators.
Yes, and you also
It's a
been in.
different story.
some aviation tours as well. So you did the aviation tour of North Korea, been flying vintage planes in Europe, in different places around the world.
Yes, I'm trying to do so. There are several unusual aviation tours that do not look like each other, but each of them is remarkable in some sense for me.
So which
So,
type of
for
planes
example,
you flown? Like all Tupolevs, Ilyushin?
yes, all Tupolev, so Tupolev 134, Tupolev 154 B2, Illusion 62, Illusion 76, Illusion 18, and Illusion 14. So Illusion 14, I think it's one of most unusual planes that I've been on board. It was restored also by enthusiasts. And the second reason that is that my first flight on Illusion 14 was on an air show.
Okay.
So during that short flight, the plane banked up to 60 or 70 degrees, and it was impressive.
Wow.
The overload was about 2, and the camera became very heavy in my arms.
So yeah, I'm gonna post some references about these planes, some photos or some videos, so that people can get an idea of what these planes look like. So basically, it's because of you have this passion for aviation that you started this super big project that it's keeping you very busy now. It's the restoration of a Tupolev 104.
I can explain shortly how it appeared on Birsk airfield.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it's a good idea. You can tell us a bit about this plane and about the sort of restoration project you are doing now. But first of all, short introduction, the Tupolev 104 was one of the first jet airliners in the world. We can say it was the first successful one because I think the only previous one that entered service was the Comet from Great Britain that had a number of problems and had to be taken out of service very shortly after. But the Tupolev 104 was the first jet-powered airliner that actually had a successful career and went on to fly for many years in the Soviet Union and with other airlines of the former Soviet bloc. And the plane you're restoring now, it used to be an Aeroflot Tu-104. Can you tell us a bit more about the Tupolev 104 and in particular this specific plane that you are restoring now? How did you find it and how did you come up with this idea of bringing it back to the original state?
I can say firstly a few words about Tupolev 104 in general. Of course, it was a very bright plane, and it has also remarkable history. On the one hand, its history had many new discoveries, new solutions, and achievements. And although it started flying more than 60 years ago, some equipment on Tupolev 104 is the same as on some airplanes that fly today. For example, some indicators on Tupolev 134 or 154 are the same as on Tupolev 104. For example, vertical speed indicators, some speed indicators, and some navigational equipment coincides on some planes. It was installed on Tupolev 104.
So can we say the Tupolev 104 was very advanced for its time?
Yes, surely. It was extremely advanced for its time. And moreover, I can say that although my plane flew from 1950s until the end of 1970s, and of course its equipment has been modernized, I am trying to restore the condition of the cockpit as close to the state of the beginning on the career as possible, because on that time for sure that plane was one of symbol of scientific progress, and many people were impressed by it. And by the way, recently when some young student pilots came inside the cockpit of my Tupolev 104, one of them said, "Oh, it looks like inside a spaceship." It was quite funny.
Yes, I can imagine it's quite an impressive sight. I mean, I have only seen it in pictures, like
Mhm.
the ones you sent me, because I must say here, I wrote an article about your project some time ago
Mhm.
for CNN, and
Mhm.
I'm going to post a link.
Yes, I remember.
I'm going to post a link on the show notes. But for those people that haven't read this article, can you tell us how this project started? There was this aircraft near Novosibirsk. How did you come up with this idea that something could be done with this airframe? And how did
Mhm.
you start to to get all these different parts and components, which I think you are sourcing online from all over the world?
Yes, usually I buy them online. So my plane flew in several places. It was based in several places. So it started its career in Vnukovo. So it was based in Vnukovo from 1958 until 1967.
Yeah.
In particular,
Just a
Vnukovo
note
in
here.
Moscow.
Nukovo is one of the airports in Moscow, so it's
Yes, yes.
because maybe not all the listeners are familiar with Moscow Airport.
I'm sorry.
So Nukovo is it's one of the three major airports in Moscow. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, I
So
interrupted you. So it
for
was
the
based in Moscow for flying for Aeroflot.
Yes, yes. During all its career, it flew for Aeroflot. So, firstly, it flew from Moscow Vnukovo. In particular, it flew abroad, and I saw many pictures in internet taken in London, Heathrow, and Amsterdam. So the tail number was written in huge letters. So it was definitely my plane
You
with
can
its
track it.
tail number 42382. During that period, its cabin consisted of two classes. There was a first class with sofas and swivel chairs, and a touristic class with a 2+2 layout in the cabin. Later, from 1967 until 1977, it flew from St. Petersburg Pulkovo, but at that time the name of St. Petersburg was Leningrad, and name was of Pulkovo was Шоссейная.
St. Petersburg Airport, still the code of the airport is still Leningrad, still LED,
Yes,
Leningrad. So
yes, yes.
hasn't changed.
Yes, but the name of the airport now, the name of the airport is Pulkovo, but at
Yeah.
that time the name was Шоссейная, not
Mhm.
Pulkovo.
Yes, and the airport, Pulkovo Airport, has changed a lot as well. I mean, if you fly there now,
Yes,
it's very
extremely
modern,
changed.
extremely modern airport now. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Also, this plane was involved in flights in Ulyanovsk School of Civil Aviation, and during that period, the layout of the cabin was changed to one class with a 2+3 seat in each row. So there were two seats on the left hand side and three seats on the right hand side.
How many people in total?
About 115. Yes, during its flights from Moscow, it could take about 70 passengers, but later the number of seats increased.
Okay.
And the plane got to Novosibirsk Tolmachevo Aviation Unit only in 1977. It had been in Tolmachevo only for 1 year.
And that's when it got retired.
Yes, and the story of how it appeared in Versk is quite unusual. Many people asked me whether it was some kind of emergency landing or did anything happen.
Because
But
Verks,
actually,
we must say,
sir?
it's not a commercial airport. It's more of a local airfield. So it's not.
Yes, it's one of local airfields for light aircrafts.
Mhm.
It is also former military airfield.
So you wouldn't expect
Not
an
commercial.
Aeroflot plane to end up there, in principle.
Yes, it was quite an interesting story.
Mhm.
In the middle of 1970s, one scientist from the Institute of Theoretical and Applied Mechanics, his name was Valery Rytsarev. He was an aviation enthusiast also, and he began to revive a glider club. And he chose Bersk Airfield as the base for this glider club. And together with this, he founded a school for young glider pilots for teenagers. And in that period, it was the second half of 1970s, many Tupolev 104 planes became written off, and some of them began being used by as monuments, cafes, and small cinemas, and etc. And Rytsarev got the idea that Tupolev 104 would be perfect for a glider school, both as a class for children and for preserving aviation history.
But
It's just as a airframe that would be on the ground, so it wouldn't be flying. It would be static.
Yes, he decided to make it as a static movement, and to solve these all questions, he came to Ministry of Civil Aviation in Moscow, and he managed to approve the plan to arrange a flight of Tupolev 104 from Tolmachovo to Bersk. Also, a crew of pilots who learned to fly at the Bersk airfields was found. So, since Bersk airfield was an airfield also for student pilots, it was not a very hard task, I think. And before the flight from Tolmachovo to Bersk on Tupolev 104, this crew flew around this airfield on a light aircraft just to decide how to approach. Also, the soil on the runway was measured with a hardness tester, and then on the morning of 27th of June 1978, our Tupolev 104 flew from Tolmachovo to Bersk. The flight took about 8 minutes.
8 minutes, huh?
Less than 8 minutes, yes.
Yeah, they're very close by. The aircraft then, it was the last flight, so it stayed there.
Yes, it was the last flight of the aircraft. It was also last flight of the crew of the aircraft. Okay. So after the flight, they also became retired.
Because the Aeroflot, when Aeroflot replaced the Tu-104s, the replacement, I guess, was the Tu-134.
I think it depended on routes. On some longer routes, it was replaced by a Tupolev 154. On some by Tupolev 134 on short ones. On the base of Tupolev 104, Tupolev created Tupolev 124. It was a small copy of Tupolev 104. If I remember correctly, it was quite smaller than Tupolev 104. And then on the base on Tupolev 124, they created Tupolev 134 aircraft.
Of which
so I guess that most of airframe is the same as on Tupolev 124, but of course there are some essential differences.
Still some 134s flying?
Yes, surely.
Yes, I remember I tracked some of them. A few years ago, I also did an article on the vintage planes, the planes that are now approaching the end of operational life. And I remember there were still some 134s active. I think some in North Korea. In Russia, there were still some, but very few. But I think they were not in normal service. At that time, I'm talking about maybe a few years ago. In some other countries, there were still some, but very, very few that are taking passengers. But
yes,
anyway,
in Russia, there are few Tupolev 134. Even there are some planes Tupolev 134A with glass nose. And last year, by the way, one aviation tour was organized on Tupolev 134A of company Cosmos.
So you have a glass nose, so you can see the terrain under. You can see what's under the plane from the the glass. That's cool. It's a bit like a Second World War bomber, sort of kind of navigator. So basically, there at Bersk, there was this glider club. What happened between this 1978 and then the moment, I don't know which year was that, when you found this plane and decided to restore it?
Yes, so for the first time, that plane had been a class for young glider pilots. Also, I heard that it also was used as a cafe for young glider pilots. But unfortunately, in 1990s, there were hard times for the whole country, and probably there were no flights on glider club, so probably there were no glider club at all. And Tupolev 104 was also unlucky at that time, so the cockpit was almost completely destroyed, and equipment was stolen or broken, and no seats were left in the cabin. And I can estimate that only about 5% of all cockpit equipment survived that time.
Only 5%. Wow.
I think, yes, only few indicators. Because when I came to the cockpit of Tu-104 in 2009, so most of equipment was absent, and the items that were present in the cockpit, they were broken, most of them. It was quite a sad view.
And when do you come into this story? What happened? I mean, you just found this aircraft, you heard about it. Tell us.
Yes. I can say that I became interested in the plane in the beginning of 2000s when I started to fly to international conferences. So the way to conference places is usually quite long. So it consisted of several flights, first from Moscow, then from Moscow to European countries, for example. And usually I chose a seat near wings, and it was always exciting for me to see how flaps work. And of course, it was my dream to visit cockpit. But nowadays it's almost impossible. And 11 years ago, in 2009, I learned from internet and from friends that there was a real airplane, Tu-104, at Bersk Airfield. And I decided to go there and visit the aircraft. So that day I was lucky, since one of instructors of the air club showed me the plane and allowed me to take many pictures. And I can say that this meeting with the plane was one of main events of that year for me. But nevertheless, as I said earlier, I was very upset by the condition of the plane, in particular of the cockpit, and so I concluded that this aircraft deserved to be in much better state than the one he was in, and I decided to restore it as good as possible.
So what did you do? I mean, there is this plane there. It was not your plane, or you didn't know who the owner was, I guess.
Yes,
so what were your next steps? So you said, well, I want to bring this plane back to the original state.
Of course, it's my dream to get this plane back to the original state, and I'm doing the best I could in this direction.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, you are right. It was quite hard to agree with the administration of the airfield and on the flying club to make them to allow me to restore the aircraft. So for the first time, they could not understand why should I do it and why I wanted to restore the aircraft. But nevertheless, they at last allowed me to do something with the aircraft, something good, to find equipment, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
And moreover, instructors from the air club, they advised me a place where I can find some former pilots of Tu-104 who can share with me some literature.
So you went to meet the people that were flying on that plane.
Yeah, so I met a few former pilots. So one of them gave me flight manual, so I copied it, and he also shared contacts of his colleagues. And one of them, he was a former flight engineer. He gave me a few technical manuals.
How many people did operate the Tu-104? How many people in the crew?
For the first time, there were 5 in the cockpit of Tu-104. So they were captain, a first officer, navigator, flight engineer, and radio operator.
Wow, that's quite a big group. Yes. For the size of the plane, huh?
Yes, but the cockpit is quite big.
Yeah.
For 5 men. And on the days when flights of young glider students are arranged, they usually visit the cockpit of Tu-104 during, for example, during breaks. And I can say that there are about 15 people at the same moment in the cockpit because they are too much excited. They cannot wait. Although I advise them to go by groups consisted of 3 or 4 people, just to have opportunities to take some good pictures. No, they decide to go by crowd.
When were you able to get hands on your work, your restoration work? What happened next? So
Mhm.
you
So
had got this information, this manual, so you were starting to get an idea of what the plane looked like.
yes, so firstly, I studied information from manuals. I started from studying how panels, started with studying of structure of panels,
Hmm.
of pilots, of navigator. But although I had some technical manuals with a description of these panels, the main difficulty was that these manuals were written in 1950s, but the plane had been modernized, and of course it didn't coincide completely
So
with the scheme that was in the books.
it had a midlife upgrade.
Yes, because the differences were not very much essential. There were slight differences.
Hmm.
But nonetheless, I had to think what equipment I should find. It was clear from the technical manual about most part of equipment, but there were moments that I had to think about.
Your goal is to restore it to the original 1950s configuration.
Yes,
Hmm.
I tried to bring it to 1950s state as close
Hmm.
as possible. Of course, I doubt that I'll manage to bring it completely to the state of 1950s, but maybe to the beginning. I'll bring it to the state of beginning of 1960s. I think it's also it would be also not bad. Also, I want to show some peculiarities of structure of equipment of Tu-104. For example, during some time, it was from the end of 1950s, I think, and in the beginning of 1960s, there were two horizon indicators on the panel of captain with different pitch indications. So the main one showed the indication view from the airplane to Earth, and the other one showed the indication of view from Earth to the airplane by pitch. It was also quite unusual.
Can we say that most of your work is focused on the cockpit now, but you are also looking at other parts of the aircraft? So
Yes,
you're also putting
I'm.
some seats there, right? And
Yes,
yeah.
yes. I also want to restore its cabin. Of course, but the main part of my attention is focused on cockpit
And the
equipment.
instruments. Oh,
Yes, and the instrument. Yes. By the way, one of our enthusiasts is now making a power supply, so we want the equipment get it back to life. And I
so
think it would be very interesting to see how it works.
yes, that
So
indeed
it's
it
the
will be.
nearest, is one of nearest goals to bring the equipment to life. But also we are working on cabin. So 3 years ago, I found 10 original seats from
Mhm.
this aircraft. Also, one of my colleagues sent me two seats of 1950s era from Moscow. Here, all the seats were restored because their
Uh-huh.
state was not very good, and now they are installed in the first part of the cabin.
We're gonna speak now about how you get all these different pieces from different parts of the of the country and of the world. But first of all, one question: when you said you're gonna bring back all these instruments, are they going to work because you connect them to some electrical current?
We are going to connect them, but
Hmm.
it's too early to talk about it.
Okay,
The
so
supply
I, I
is
suggest
passing test
I
now.
suggest we go back to 2009, I think, when you
Mhm,
got started. So you had these conversations with the administration of the club
mhm.
where the airplane is located. You managed to locate the crew that gave you some manuals and some basic information so that you can get a blueprint of what needs to be done. So when you, let's say, you start to work on the plane, what happened and how did this happen?
Do you mean about the beginning of my working with the plane, or
Yes, yes. I mean, when did you start your hands-on work on the plane? At the beginning, it was just only you, right? Now you have, if I
yes, yes,
understood, you have a team of volunteers that are helping you.
yes. There is a team of a small team of volunteers that help me. But yes, you're right. When I started this project, I was alone. I started with studying the literature. So my first task was to understand what is missing, what I have. The next task was to find the absent equipment. By the way, I can say that specifics of my main work helped me a bit because, as I said, that since some equipment had been modernized, and I had to look for some relatively new equipment. It was, I mean, now of course it was not new, but in comparison with the equipment of 1950s, it was new. I had to study some equipment that already was in the cockpit, and I had to read some literature which other equipment is works together with the existing one, and finally I had more or less complete list of equipment that I have to look for.
And you started looking for this in the internet.
Yes, in the internet. I started to look in some websites made for aviation enthusiasts, and I found some one or two main websites where I began to study all of the topics. Who can sell and who can sell me equipment? And,
in Russian websites, that was in
yes, Russian website. It was a Russian website, yes. So some people come to this website and make announcements of that they sell some equipment, and people write to them and buy this equipment.
Wow, I'm quite amazed that you can go online and find parts and components of a Soviet airplane from 60, 70 years ago online. That's crazy. I mean, it's like people have this at home, or I don't know. It's interesting.
Yes, quite interesting. But besides these specialized websites made for aviation enthusiasts, I also looked for some websites, some widely known websites such as eBay, for example. For example, I found 2 radio stations on eBay. I looked for radio stations that were used in 1950s, 1960s. Those are R800, and I have not found any of them in Russia. But when I came to eBay, I found 2 radio stations in Poland. So I ordered both of them, and the seller sent me them by usual mail, and I was lucky. They were delivered perfectly.
And how you deliver, like, for example, like an aircraft seat? I mean, you send it by post. How you get it delivered? I mean, you get like 10. You mentioned like 10 aircraft seats.
Yes, 10 aircraft seats, but it was easier.
Okay.
Some people from some graduates of Glider Club told me that there were some seats in one of our institutes in Akademgorodok. So I wrote to administration of that institute, and I just agreed with them that they would give me these 2 seats, these 10 seats.
Well, at least that was locally, so you didn't need to take them from far away. So this you've been making this since 2009. So you've been 11 years working on this topic. What's the status now? What's the situation with the plane?
I think that. Do you mean the completion?
What's the completion level at the moment? Where are you in terms of completion?
I think that nowadays cockpit is about 90% or even 95% complete. But of course, I have much work to do with the cabin and with other equipment. So since we want to get most of airplane structures back to life, also we have to deal with some hard problems. For example, problems of corrosion in some places, problems of finding some absent rods, some electrical mechanisms. For example, to extract and retract flaps, some electrical mechanisms were used, but unfortunately, they were vandalized in 1990s, and nothing is left of them.
Are you going to look after the external part of the aircraft?
Fortunately, fuselage is complete.
Okay, but
some lights need to be repaired or replaced, and of course I'll look for them. But now I think it's too early to talk about it because there is huge amount of work of repairing inside the plane. Also, some equipment from the cockpit needs repairing.
And what's the goal when you get to 100% completion? Well, you get visits already, but you're planning to keep it as a sort of a permanent exhibition or something like that?
Actually, I want to bring this plane to as good state as possible. So, of course, my dream is to make it flying.
That
And
would be
I also want to believe that sometimes some miracles happen, and sometimes we can participate in creating such miracles. So there's no limits to perfection, I think. But yes, the nearest goal is to make it to make a museum where everything works.
So when do you think it's going to be completed? Well, it's possibly never going to be fully completed, but when do you can call it like 99.9% completed? Do you have a time frame for this?
No, and I think time frames are unpredictable.
I can imagine.
But however, recently I met some people. Some of them are from Russia, some of them are from Europe, and they have a great experience of successful restoration projects. And they suggested me assistance in my Tu-104 project. So in particular, probably we will arrange some fundraising.
I wanted to ask you about this because I remember when I wrote this article, it was published on CNN. Shortly after, I got contact by someone in America that was asking for a way to reach you out. I think he wanted to provide some financial support for the project. I don't know if that finally materialized, or you have, well, as you said, you have also.
But we are also working on it.
Okay.
But probably current time is not ideal time for do fundraising in the US since because of pandemic problems.
But if
there are many cases.
If someone wanted to contribute to this project in some way, what would be the best way to do it? You have a website. I think you have a Facebook group for the.
Yes, I have a Facebook group. I also have an Instagram account, and I have also an account on Russian social network vk.com. So the name is Tu-104A. So on Instagram, on the Facebook groups, also the name is Tu-104A.
Okay. Yes. In any case, I'm gonna post the links to the show notes on Allplane.tv, so that everyone that is interested can check it out and contact you if they want to contribute in any way. Are people able to visit this aircraft now? Do they need to contact you? Do they need to contact the airport at Versk or the glider club? What's the way to do it?
The best way to visit the aircraft is to contact me.
Okay.
To PM me or to write me on WhatsApp.
Okay.
Because I am the only person who has keys from the cockpit.
I'm gonna post the link so that they can find those pages. Just to wrap it up, do you have any other aviation projects at the moment apart from the 104?
No, I don't have.
You're fully committed, fully committed to that aircraft.
Yes, I fully commit to this aircraft, but I also have to work much on my main place of work, and also I can mention a group of enthusiasts from Krasnoyarsk who made a big flight simulator from a real cockpit of Tupolev 154. I often visit Krasnoyarsk because of my work. I'm a member of a committee that deals with PhD thesis in the Siberian Federal University. I also am head of examining committee in Siberian Federal University. So I visit Krasnoyarsk very often. And each time I visit Krasnoyarsk, I go to them and fly that big simulator.
Krasnoyarsk is another big city in Siberia.
Yes, another big city, and it takes only 1 hour of flying to get from Novosibirsk to Krasnoyarsk. So it's not very far.
Actually, I must say that Krasnoyarsk was mentioned in a previous episode of this podcast because we had here on the podcast a conversation with guys from the Allplane route, which are some American guys that are planning to run an air route flying from Alaska, actually from Montana, and then via Alaska to Siberia and all the way to Krasnoyarsk with some vintage planes. So I'm going to post a link as well on the notes so that people can check this podcast. It's the Allplane route. And that's a celebration, a commemoration of the air corridor that was during the war between Alaska and Soviet Union, bringing planes from America to Europe for the war. And Krasnoyarsk was a city that was at one end of that route. So yeah, an interesting city. And one where actually people can also see a vintage plane. I think it's a former C-47, also from that time. From the time, I think right after the war. It's a plane that was that crash landed in the north of Russia, in the Arctic.
I saw it.
Yes, I wrote an article for CNN about this because I think a couple of years ago, they recovered this plane, they salvaged it, and there was a whole expedition to recover this plane. And they brought it actually by boat through the river all the way to Krasnoyarsk. And I think now it's at the museum there. So I'm going to post as well a link to that story so that people can check it out, because there seems that Siberia is a very rich area for aviation stories.
Yes, I agree.
You need to move by plane, right? So the distances are so large. Everyone is a bit of an aviator. Well, it's been great talking today with you about this project. Wishing you all the best with the remaining task you have ahead before you complete the restoration of this Tupolev 104. I'm going to put all the details on the show notes. Please do check it out because it's a super cool aircraft and it's a super cool project that you are doing. I don't know if you want to add anything else, any other message for people that are listening.
May I add something about the restoration of cockpit?
Of course. Yes.
Okay, so as I said that some equipment is the same as on aircrafts that fly nowadays, but most of equipment is very specific, and many systems, for example, landing system, it consists of several parts. So there are indicators, receivers, some remote controls, and all the parts I bought in different places. So even both indicators, one I bought in one place, one in another. This situation happened with almost all systems of Tupolev 104.
And are you now looking? Are you looking for a specific part now? You can use this platform.
I'm looking for specialists. Now I'm looking for specialists that deals with some specific parts. It was a surprise for me that Tupolev 104 could be guided by sun, moon, and stars. So it had astronomical navigational equipment. Of course, it's extremely rare nowadays. And only last year, in the November of 2019, I found astronomical chronometer, and in this June, I found a sextant that worked together with this astronomical chronometer. The seller sent it me from Latvia.
Like all ships They
Yes.
navigate by the stars.
Yes.
Interesting.
Moreover, there were two different astronomic compasses on Allplane 104 with different principles of work. But this sextant that was sent from Latvia is huge. Its weight is about 30 kilograms.
40.
30.
Wow.
30, but it's very heavy.
Mm-hmm.
But since there are lots of lenses, lots of glass in it, most of it needs repairing. So now I'm looking for specialists who can help me with the repair and maybe with producing some new parts, maybe with repairing the existing parts. It's quite
well.
a big
If any specialist is listening, well, contact Maria. You can then discuss this part of the project. Very good. So thank you so much, Maria. It's been great speaking with you.
Thanks.
Learning about the project, and keep me updated when the plane is got some significant milestones and we can post it on Allplane.tv as well.
Oh, thanks a lot. Surely I'll let you know as soon as I have some progress.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
And thank you also.
And one more thing before you go. Remember, you can subscribe to the Allplane Podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and many other platforms. If you like this podcast, please do not hesitate to give it a good rating or to recommend it to a friend. See you soon!